You tell me, as the person who's not as much of a fan of these as I am, okay, and you're a stickler for action scenes, if you were to see that scene in the woods with Iron Man and Thor and Captain America fighting each other, I'm sure you, in your heart of hearts, objectively look at it as completely ridiculous. Why would anybody like this?
I mean, that's what's great about watching shit on cable, is that you can just tune in and you're like, you don't have the context of the rest of the movie, whether you've seen it or not.
And why is this blonde man with a red cape fighting a man in metal armor?
You can see that footage, like, isolated, and you're like, Jesus Christ, what the hell is this?
So I'm gonna sit in my chair here for a second while Dylan plays Super Mario Odyssey and talk about Thor Ragnarok.
Thor Rabblebop.
Thor Beeblebop. Alright, we're gonna talk about Thor Beeblebop, Thor Ragnarok, sequel to Thor the Dark. That's actually pretty apt for my feelings on that movie. It's like Thor the Grimdark. I haven't done one of these videos like properly in a while. That's not me just like chortling into a camera.
Always chortling into
I'm not always chortling into a camera. Usually like when I sit down. The thing about Thor is it's a character that nobody really ever intended to take seriously. Because you can't. It's fucking Thor. I watched a very interesting analysis, or listened to yesterday, regarding the Marvel Cinematic Universe and why it works. And it's really fascinating to really kind of think critically about it, because you have this foundation work that is laid out, okay? Because you have your first Iron Man movie, you have the Captain America movie, and you have the Thor movie, and in a way, for the idea of the universe being bigger than these individual characters, you have that groundwork laid in Iron Man 2, even though that movie is one of the biggest mistakes of the whole franchise. It was the first one to introduce this concept of, oh, these characters can co-mingle with each other. Let's see how people kind of respond to that. Despite the fact that a lot of the Marvel movies seem pretty samey, they're actually experimental in the creation of formula of filmmaking. And so as somebody who was on board with this fantastical idea of, yeah, let's get a 5-character Avengers movie just from seeing Samuel Jackson at the end of the first Iron Man movie, I'm like, yeah, let's fucking do it. I don't even care if they're all kind of seem like the same movie. It's the same brand. That's the idea. To me, going to a Marvel movie, even though I feel a little bit fatigued over the last couple of years, it feels like I'm tuning into an episode of my favorite TV series. And so you got these serialized episodes, and some of them are stronger than the others. But the whole point is that you have character development and characters dynamically changing with each instance of storytelling that's significant to the last, even if that one in particular isn't so great. So when you and the reason that groundwork is laid is so you don't have mistakes like the DC universe, because when you just objectively watch Batman v Superman and you're like, I don't know, I'm not familiar with this version of Batman. This version of Superman was pretty lame. What the fuck? Wonder Woman? Why is everything gray? It's kind of like they didn't do the work there. They didn't do the legwork, and so they just wanted to jump right into the payoff. Whereas if you were to watch that first action scene between Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America in the Avengers completely out of context, we'd have been making fun of it to no end.
Shakespeare in the Park?
You tell me, as the person who's not as much of a fan of these as I am, and you're a stickler for action scenes, if you were to see that scene in the woods with Iron Man and Thor and Captain America fighting each other, I'm sure you, in your heart of hearts, objectively look at it as completely ridiculous. Why would anybody like this?
I mean, that's what's great about watching shit on cable, is that you can just tune in and you're like, you don't have the context of the rest of the movie, whether you've seen it or not.
And why is this blonde man with a red cape fighting a man in metal armor?
You can see that footage like isolated and you're like, Jesus Christ, what the hell is this?
But when you actually have the setup to that,
of course,
an Iron Man movie, a sequel to an Iron Man movie that sets up the bigger universe, and a Thor movie that was kind of a risk but kind of is better than a CW sci-fi drama, sure, it totally makes sense, because you're like, hey, I saw that movie on cable, I know who this character is, what's this other character, or I also know this other character. That's the point. And so, even though you have, you know, all this build up to these crossovers, what we have in phase 3 is what I personally have been looking forward to, which is what these single character interminglings look like. And so when we complain about movies like Ant-Man and Doctor Strange being the lesser of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they did the very same thing. They're laying the groundwork for these characters to appear in these other films, and everybody knows that Doctor Strange already appears in Thor Ragnarok. Everyone would have been like, who the hell is this guy if we didn't have a Doctor Strange movie last year? So I commend the framework that Marvel has set out to do, even if it seems like it appears to be safe a lot of the time. I have confidence in that they actually have an understanding of what they're doing, even if the people watching it actually don't. And so that kind of bleeds into my feelings on Thor Ragnarok. Because in Phase 3, you had Captain America Civil War, which has a larger cast than a second Avengers movie, and is a miracle in the feat that you have that cast of characters with their own emotional stakes, fighting against each other, and it works. You have Tony Stark in Spider-Man. You have... Is there a character that made a cameo in Guardians of the Galaxy? That one was kind of on its own.
Kurt Russell.
So when you have the concept of Thor and Hulk, the two characters in the comics lore that have for years been, you know, they've fought each other as two of the most powerful hero characters, and they always, almost always come out to a draw. It's a really fun concept to throw them into a movie together, especially because we've already had 2 solo Hulk movies in the 21st century, and neither of them have worked or sold well, and Universal won't let Marvel do it on their own anyway. But he's very positively received as a part of an ensemble, so it's actually kind of great that they're able to set up a entirely different serialized storyline for Mark Ruffalo's version of the Hulk. That's going to be carried through in Avengers 3 and 4. That being said, this is through and through a Thor movie, and it's probably objectively the best Thor movie, because even when the first Thor was even an idea, everybody's like, how are you going to make a movie out of Thor? And they did it. It succeeded. It's fine. I mean, even Kenneth Branagh did whatever he could. The production value was good for the time, but the second movie doesn't work. It's objectively the least good Marvel movie out there, and it's because it, I'm sad to say, makes the same mistakes as the DC movies, where it takes itself very, very seriously, and when it does make jokes, it's just kind of doesn't make sense. You have like Stellan Skarsgård running around in his underwear. But Thor himself also works in an ensemble a lot better too, because you have like this god tier ability of his able to play off to different characters, but also because he has this Chris Hemsworth has this natural comedic dynamic with people, and that really shone through in those 2 Avengers movies, and they bring that to the table here in the 3rd Thor movie. The other thing to mention is the risk taken with the director, Taika Waititi, who has made 2 of my favorite things ever, the vampire film that if you haven't seen you should, called What We Do in the Shadows, and also the TV series Flight of the Conchords from HBO. Just this awkward, off-kilter, off the beaten path, just sense of humor, and it's almost as though in the same way that you watch a Guardians of the Galaxy movie and you positively feel like I'm watching multiple characters play James Gunn, you feel that in regards to Taika's direction, especially when he plays characters himself in his own projects as well. And he does play Korg in this movie too, the big rock man. Probably objectively the best, most concise of the Marvel movies of 2017 of the big 3. The other 2 being Guardians 2 and Spider-Man Homecoming. But it's also probably might be my favorite of Phase 3 so far. And I'll kind of get into that in a minute, but basically to set it up, the movie is through and through a comedy film with action scenes. And that's totally fine. That's exactly how they're selling the movie. If you can merit this movie for anything, it is for once in the year of 2017, we get a movie that, as you watch it, is the movie that you were sold on. You get your Jeff Goldblum, you get Kate Blanchett being a hammy villain, you get Thor fighting Hulk, you get Hulk being talky and dumb, and it's just odd and funny and is like a nice, throwaway storyline in the part of the cinematic universe of Marvel because it's out in the cosmos, but it also has larger consequences that feel like they're going to be significant moving forward, and I'll get into that when I start talking about spoilers. But basically, Thor comes back to Asgard after fighting a hell demon in some of the best action choreography I've seen with Thor and his hammer to date, basically, Kate Blanchett's Hela comes back from her fantasy prison, and she's about to take over Asgard and casts Thor and Loki away to a junk planet, and that's kind of where they get picked up by Tessa Thompson's Scrapper character, and she is the best drunk I've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. No offense to Tony Stark, and they are basically sold off to Jeff Goldblum's The Grandmaster, and if you wanted a Jeff Goldblum memified film, you got it here. Jeff Goldblum's the shit out of this. There's a moment where he just kind of laughs at himself and stops talking, and the movie just stops along with him. And then from there, Thor fights the Hulk, and it kind of turns into this, they escape from the planet thing. It's just one of those. Yeah, it's just a great buddy comedy. The comedy feels like it's a road trip movie, but it's really just Thor's got to get back to Asgard and fight Hela. The jokes all land. The characters are all likable, even the bad characters, even the characters that you don't really give a crap about. The Anthony Hopkins version of Odin here, for the brief amount that he's in, actually feels significant. Benedict Cumberbatch has great comedic timing, kind of piggybacking off of the legwork done in Doctor Strange. But yeah, I mean, it feels ridiculous to say, with coming up on 10 years of these things, but the 17th Marvel movie is probably one of the strongest so far, because it's the third movie in the Thor franchise, and the first one was an experimental risk, and the second one wasn't a hit, but people liked the character anyway. They were able to take Taika's vision, and it feels like one of his screenplays thrust into a Marvel movie, and it probably has some of the best action choreography regarding Thor and Hulk up to this point. It kind of renders any action scene seen with both of them in Avengers 2 kind of moot. I would say I would probably, because I liked Spider-Man Homecoming, it actually felt like the Spider-Man, like the animated versions I always liked, the comic versions I always liked, so I would kind of put it squarely right there neck and neck with Spider-Man Homecoming. As far as like cosmic level, I think I potentially like it just as much as the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and a lot more than I liked Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And here's why. It's because Guardians 2 has some pacing problems, and the characters don't really feel like they develop. In fact, to me, it felt like they regressed from who they were. Whereas this one, the pacing's concise and tight, the ensemble is great and effective on each other, and they all kind of have this moment, like this dynamic moment, either in fight choreography or events that happen to them. Thor and Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner and Hulk feel like they are personally, emotionally, and in strength in a different place at the end of this movie than they are at the, when they started, or at the end of Avengers 2. So if you were to kind of show these characters a version of themselves, in the future, like say that by the time Avengers 3 was gonna come around, and you showed them to themselves at the beginning of their story arc, you're kind of like, wow, that's like, must have been through a lot, and it feels like they have. I didn't really get that with the Guardians characters. So I think that despite being an out-and-out comedy film, as you're watching it, it feels inconsequential, but when you think about what really happens to these characters, it's actually super duper important to them, to their integrity, to their development as in terms of the script writing. As far as it being a comedy film and not something else, you have to think about the different tiers of the Marvel Universe. And Iron Man and Captain America, or in the TV case like Daredevil and Jessica Jones, they're grounded, right? There's slightly fantastical elements, but there's things surrounding the characters that feel normal and relatable, so you can make this thing grounded in some kind of realism. Therefore, there's room for dramatic tension. Guardians of the Galaxy is a comedy film. Spider-Man is a little bit there, so that's mostly comedy. Thor Ragnarok is very much is falling back on the fact that these characters are out of this world and completely ridiculous, and how could you possibly take them seriously because you didn't when you saw Thor the second one. When I see people giving feedback on this movie for Thor Ragnarok, and they're like, I wanted dramatic tension, I wanted something serious, I'm like, alright, think about this in the context of everything else that's going on here. You have Black Panther coming up, and that's going to be one of those grounded, probably more serious films. It's going to be probably pretty significant in the dramatic state of the Marvel Universe. And then you have Avengers 3 and 4 coming up, and we can already tell that the directors want to make it as serious as Civil War was. And Civil War last year was pretty serious on its own, even though it kind of had that balance with its own comedic timing. You need a moment of levity here. And when you have something that's so egregiously out there, I would say go nuts. Just let everybody have a good time. And I could tell that even the people making this movie were having a blast making it. Even Cate Blanchett, like one of the most renowned actresses of our time, is just having a crap ton of fun just hamming it up as hella. The comedic timing's great, the script writing's great, the character development is great, production design. The only thing I can really gripe about is the CGI, because it's CGI, what are you gonna do? But even then, I find that the fight choreography was pretty solid, probably some of the best in the Marvel Universe to date. So that's my 2 cents. As far as the significance goes, and I'll be getting into spoiler territory here, you have very important things actually somehow being set up in the Marvel Universe here. You have, you have Loki potentially ending the film with the Tesseract in hand. You have the destruction of Asgard in an actually really nice emotional resonance moment that kind of reflects something that had in the comics, that the people of Asgard are Asgard itself and not the actual place. I felt like that had more emotional resonance for the characters that you're watching than the super dramatic fight between Bucky and Cap and Iron Man at the end of Civil War. So that kind of plays into my feeling that it doesn't matter whether the film's a comedy or not, because sometimes a comedy allows you to enjoy the presence of characters enough that you can still feel that without having something super dramatic happen. And then the other part is the end credits tag. And in case you missed the end credits tag and you want to go see the movie again for yourself and you're still watching this, spoilers, Thanos' ship. I mean, the fact that Loki has the Tesseract, the fact that the Asgardians don't have a home and they're about to be invaded by Thanos, and we know from the Comic-Con trailer that Thor is probably going to end up whacking on the Guardians' windshield. We can only imagine what the setup of Thor Ragnarok's going to have for Avengers 3. So I'm pretty excited about that. So I would say, just by a hair, Thor Ragnarok's probably the best Marvel movie of 2017, and probably on par with whatever you think that the best of the Phase 3 movies are. Definitely not like top 3, but I think it's a solid movie. What do you want? I mean, they know what they're doing, and what are we gonna do? Criticize them for not making something accurate to the comics when they've already built their own lore that's super not accurate to the comics? I mean, you can, but that'd be stupid.